if this isn't your jam, that's fine. That being said, the number of times I've seen someone sit down at a table because they want to like pretend to be an elf and like murder some goblins or whatever, and then they like come away having like some kind of learning about who they are or like what's important to them is striking.
Okay. 1, 2, ready, go.
Welcome to the Called to Be Bad podcast. My name is Mariah Martin, and I feel called to be bad. It turns out I'm not the only one. Join us as we dig into all things bad, scandalous, deviant, you know, the stuff that makes good church folks squirm in the sanctuary. Why? Well, because sometimes the scandalous is spiritual, deviant is divine, and bad is beautiful. Say yes to the call and let's see what Holy... Hi, Davi. Welcome to Called to Be Bad.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here.
So this is Davi Weasley, and I'm going to let Davi introduce himself.
My name is Davi. I'm a pastor up here in Northwest Washington in a town called Bellingham, right in between Seattle and Vancouver. I'm married to Rachel, who is planting a queer activist Mennonite church called Community of Hope. And I'm a parent to Zeke, who is 4 and just started Promise K, which is like pre-K out here, and seems to be just having a wonderful time in that. Yeah.
Nice. I realized that I should ask each guest like the most important question to me, which is, do you have any pets? And if so, what are they?
Thank you for asking. I really neglected in not mentioning my cat, and I think I would like face some serious, not like direct pushback because of that, but like indirect. It would come back to haunt me, certainly.
Yeah.
Rutabaga Hermione Weasley is a very precious tabby tortie. She's 7 or 8, and she has like a complicated relationship with my kid and with all other humans, but really, I think is pretty satisfied in her role as kind of like presiding authority figure of our home.
I love that. That's awesome. I can't get over the name.
Yeah, Rutabaga, she's great. For years, Rachel was like, well, we're going to name our cat Rutabaga. And I was like, no, let's make up a bunch of cat names, and so then when we meet the cat, we'll know what the cat should be called, maybe. Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, we can, but like she's going to be called Rutabaga. And I was like, no, and then we met the cat after we, moved and settled in and we're ready to have a cat in our lives. We met the cat and we were like, this is the cat. What should we call her? And I like Googled a picture of a Rutabaga on my phone. What's the swearing policy on this podcast? I forgot.
It's called to be bad. So,
okay. And I looked at the Rutabaga and I looked at the cat and I was like, shit. Because it's just like really spot on.
What does a Rutabaga look like?
A Rutabaga is like a cross between a sweet potato and like a Beanie Baby.
Amazing. Okay. I had to Google Rutabaga.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so anyways, so today Davi and I are going to be talking about role-playing games as spiritual direction. And when I heard the two linked together like that, my mind was blown. I'd never heard of anything like that before. I've heard of role-playing games or live-action role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of thing. But as spiritual direction, like, what? So I was very excited to talk to Davi about that, and we decided to do this in a 2-part series. Davi and I, a week ago, we sat down and Davi led me through a session, a spiritual direction / role-playing game session. And I got to go on a pretty sweet adventure, which we will get into and kind of dissect that whole experience. But first, as per usual on Called to Be Bad, we're going to start with definitions to develop a shared language for this episode. And so, Davi, I'm curious how you how you define both role-playing games, like what are role-playing games, and also what is spiritual direction, and then we can discover how the two are.
Yeah,
can be linked.
And it'll be fun to talk about whether, like, which of those we did and didn't do last week. I think is a good question too. So when I talk about, I'm going to talk about spiritual direction first because it's in some ways an older tradition, but only in some ways. So in kind of medieval Catholic spiritual practice, especially monastics would have somebody that they would go visit with to kind of help them and support them in their prayer life and spiritual life. And I think it goes back earlier. I think it's got roots in kind of the desert mothers and fathers of the, like, third or fourth century. So like ascetics who would go out in the desert and just like pray and fight demons all day and then like tell stories about it with their friends. So these days, I go to see my spiritual director, or sometimes I say my spiritual direction person or my spiritual companion. There's a lot of different language for it, and none of it is particularly spot on. I think spiritual director implies like somebody who's going to give me some orders, and that's not my practice. But like when I go see my person Sally, her job is to hold space for me and really help me hear or listen to what I'm hearing from the Spirit. And so if there's any direction involved, hopefully it's coming from the Spirit, and it can be, in my experience, really helpful to have another human in the room or on the Zoom for that, in the conversation, to sometimes ask questions, to sometimes like give a little pushback in a kind way, and to sometimes just like hold silence together. One of my favorite things about spiritual direction is like I usually start a session with my person in silence, and I know that like if that's the whole hour, that's fine, and that's like time and money well spent. So it's a lovely practice. I got trained at Loyola in Chicago after I did my MDiv at CTS there, Chicago Theological Seminary there, in part because I was interested in, and I'll say it just briefly, like when I talk about it now, like I have done some like formal spiritual direction, and that's been lovely to like hold space for folks. It's also like super informed my pastoral ministry in some very like concrete ways. Like there's a couple of tools where just like someone will answer a question and I just don't say anything, and then they like give the real answer. But also just in terms of like how I can shift into holding space in terms of what I'm doing, whether that's in a committee meeting or a youth group meeting or even preaching in a certain way. Meanwhile, role-playing games, also very old in some ways. So a lot of people, maybe you had a time when you were a child or later on when you and your friends got together on the playground or at recess and pretended to be, I don't know, superheroes was mine, or wizards. I did a lot of that. But like, action heroes or millionaires or like whatever the thing you like to pretend to do with your friends was. I think that's some version of a role-playing game. More recently, and that I think is as old as humans probably, probably before that. More recently, folk have kind of like created rules systems around that in a way that can make it more accessible to adults. So there's a lot of there's a few examples from like 200, 300, 400 years ago, but the one that gets kind of sparked is kind of like tabletop war gamers in the 20th century who were playing out like, let's play this battle from the French versus the British on this one mountainside with little model soldiers and stuff. Started bringing in like, wouldn't this be cooler if there were dragons, which so often the case. But we're also like, what if we like focused on the adventures of like one person, and like you play this guy, I'll play this guy, and we'll like play that. And so some of those folks kind of developed what became Dungeons and Dragons, which is like the big name in the industry, especially these days. And a lot of folks play that, and that's a lot of folks. That was the first kind of formal role-playing game I played, and that's true for a lot of other folks as well. But these days, like, there's a real blossoming of the hobby, art form, whatever it is, where, but I think anytime someone's sitting around with their friends and finding opportunities to kind of live into particular characters, to me, that'll feel like a role-playing game. And like, what's the line between role-playing game and like improv theater? Like, dice, I guess.
Yeah, dice.
but there's certainly a lot of overlap.
You just brought up really good memories of, I think I would play cats a lot with my friend.
Yes.
Shout out to my friend Isabel Carlson. We would play cats, and also we would like act out Sailor Moon.
Yes.
We would like there was one really elaborate, my friend Isabel was like the mastermind behind it. And we had this like world, I don't remember, there was something to do with like stolen art, and we had to like go, anyways, it's a little sad that we don't, or I guess a lot of people still do that, but I like how these role-playing games can tap into that inner child and bring that sense of imagination and creativity back. Not that it's ever lost, but yeah. Yeah,
but it can get quiet.
Yeah. But before we go into the marriage of role-playing games
Sure.
and spiritual direction, I'm curious what you are drinking today.
Oh yeah, great. So I am drinking some decaf coffee with my fancy pour over whatnot, and this is in my beautiful red ceramic mug that one of my youth made for me. Part of my role here at First Congregational is to support our middle and high school youth. So I guess for internet privacy, I should not name names, but she knows who she is. And just like, she mentioned that she was taking a pottery class. And this was like right in the midst of the pandemic. And I was just like trying to connect with folks by text that I hadn't like heard from in a while. And she was like, "What's your favorite color?" And I was like, "Well, my favorite color is red because, Pentecost." And here's this beautiful mug. And I actually don't drink out of it that much because it holds less coffee than I usually want to drink. But it's always on my desk, and I love seeing it when I look at it. And so I wanted to bring a special mug today.
Nice. Perfect. Yeah, I was trying to figure out a mug for this episode because I kind of like to correlate them. But I couldn't find, like, surprisingly, I don't have that many like nerdy mugs. And I say nerdy in the, like,
you heard it, listeners. Best. Send Mariah nerdy mugs.
Oh my goodness.
That's the clearest. Yeah.
Yes, please. But I do have a Sailor Moon mug, but I couldn't find it. I'll find it. But I do have a mug that says "Laziness is a myth," and it has flowers surrounding this little like sleeping bunny, and it's cute. So that's my mug today, and I'm drinking caffeinated coffee, which we will see if that is a mistake. I think I can get away with it, but it's in the afternoon. Normally we film in the morning, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a sweet bunny in our adventure last week.
Yes, there was. Several. Bunnies are a theme in my life. Hello, beloved baddies. A quick break to tell you that this episode is sponsored by the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul, a nonprofit that supports and amplifies the voices of edgewalkers through art that catalyzes change, laughter that brings us together, and soul awakening to the creative spark within us. The support from the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul has meant the world to this podcast, so I highly encourage you to check out their website, arthumorandsoul.com, to see their other featured artists and projects. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon or get in touch. Now I'll let you get back to this episode of Called to Be Bad. Okay, well, let's get into spiritual direction and role-playing games.
Sure. And I'm excited to hear about your experience. So let me just say briefly, when I was doing my certificate in spiritual direction, there came a time where, like, other folks in the track were taking like church history and I don't know, something else. It was like stuff I had already done in college and seminary. And so I did some independent study work. And what I ended up doing was really lovely. And it was kind of like spiritual direction extended technique. You know, in classical music, when somebody like goes around and is like plucking on the strings of the piano from the back, like that kind of thing. And with the intention of like both like, I wanted to try out these tools to see how they worked, but I also wanted to like learn more about the kind of ministry and practice of spiritual direction by trying them in different contexts. So one of those was with tarot, which was great. And one of those was with role-playing games. And I'm still not sure about like role-playing games as spiritual direction, but certainly like as a context for spiritual growth and exploration, which is maybe the same thing. So I don't know. And I was telling Mariah last week, like I mostly worked with groups in the independent study I did. And most of the role-playing game experience I had is with groups of more than 2. So 3 or 4 or 5, or sometimes a lot more. But for the spiritual direction group, I think we were up to about 6 or 7. And so it was this really like, and, you know, you can absolutely do spiritual direction in a group context, but it was, what does it mean to like do this playful, explorative, imaginative, I was going to say work, but I hope that's the wrong word. But this practice, and then let it echo around and reflect on it and see what arises from it. And one of the reasons I was curious to do that is because my own experience, you know, my buddy Mark, who is a great friend of mine, we talk about role-playing games probably at least once a week. He ran a like 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons game, and I played this wizard who, you know, we just like made up the character collaboratively over the course of a couple hours in the common room of his co-op. Right off of 53rd Street there. And Poncho Starboard, halfling wizard. And Poncho became like this lovely way for me to explore like so much of what was going on in my life. And I can remember one time like emailing him, you know, and we were just like, you know, like fighting the bad guys and like using magic. It was like, I don't know. There was lovely stuff going on in the campaign, but it wasn't trying to be particularly like personal growth oriented. It was like, let's goof off and like tell fun stories and like fight the bad guys, you know?
Yeah.
But I was like, hey Mark, like here's the like 20 things I'm working through with Poncho right now. And it was like here's the stuff about like Poncho and like my relationship to like parenting and like my relationship to like my own deity and how that intersects with like Poncho's relationship with like his like deity. And so I knew there was a lot there. And so oftentimes the characters I would play in role-playing games would either be like ways to explore parts of myself that didn't get enough airtime, or, you know, would show up in my own dreams. And, you know, it's an old practice to like give space and spiritual direction for dreams. And so I thought there was a lot there. I still think there is. And so now even when I play like whatever I play, I usually finish with a few kind of reflection questions where you can like appreciate what happened, or where we can all appreciate what happened together.
So I have a spiritual director that I see regularly, and I like this element of that role-playing games could introduce to spiritual direction. While it is like in our brains, in our minds, it feels like an embodied experience because you're imagining yourself doing things in a world. And I read somewhere, I can't cite my sources, but I read that imagining yourself doing, you know, like moving your body has physiological effects as if you were actually moving your body.
That's
cool. Yeah, it felt like an embodied experience, which I think, so it was like, it's neat because it feels like an embodied practice, but if you have limits on what you can do with your body, you can still practice this. You can still play. So that's one thing that I thought about that I think is helpful for spiritual direction.
To bounce off of that a little, like I think it's interesting. Like you played a character who was a lot like you in some ways, a different world and kind of a different style. But I wonder how that would feel if you were to do another adventure and you played, a like Russian accented like space dwarf, and for me, part of the joy of it is like it's not like some of the characters I play are like me and some are not. It's like they're all in the mix, and I find out new things about myself when I play different archetypes, different roles, different genders, different abilities, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you view this from like a biological or evolutionary perspective, I don't know why this is hitting me right now, but like if you think about puppies and animals, and their play is a lot about like mimicking what they would do in real life. Like when my bunnies, when they're happy, they do this thing called a binky, and it's like a run and a twist and like a jump, and it's a really happy, really cute thing. And they do this, presumably, not only just because they're happy, but because it exercises those muscles that they would need to use to run away from predators. And so my connection here is just that, like, this is a way for us to practice existing in this world, even if the world we have constructed is not the real world. Does that make sense? Like, we are practicing skills and learning about ourselves without real life consequences. I mean, it's kind of like fantasy. You can explore different ideas in a safe space.
Yeah, and I think there's a real gift. Like, if you're a person who like takes as part of their custom or priorities to be like really kind all the time, like to play a character now and then who's like kind of a jerk, to see how that feels and like how does that resonate in your body, and like what comes up for you when you sit with that, and all of that can be really rich. And I suspect ultimately there's kind of an integrative or integrating like invitation there of like, oh, like this part of me, this is like brazen and mean part of me, and this kind of like shy and kind part of me, and this like bold and demanding part of me, and this like trickster, seductive part. Like they're all there, and they're all like welcome at the table. Both the game table and hopefully the table of your life, and certainly like, I mean, not to get all theology about it, but like the table that Jesus sets for us, I think.
Right. No, that's beautiful, especially since I think one of the invitations of...
Is there a sound effect for the first time someone mentions Jesus on the podcast? Is that
pew, 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 pew. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Jesus dropped. I don't know. No, but I think you're onto something there, because I think one of the invitations we can receive from the best of Christianity or spirituality or following Jesus or whatever is an invitation to wholeness. And so this is a way to actually practice that and actually live that out. Whoa, my mind is blown a little bit. That's sweet.
Yeah, can I hear more about what it was like for you?
Yeah, let's talk about it. What was it like? Let's give a brief synopsis of what took place. So my character, I was Kate, and my middle name is Kate. So this is kind of like alter ego Mariah Kate. And Kate was really good at hiking, and she also was excellent at Taekwondo. And along on her journey, was there a third thing that I was good at?
There was, but I forget what it is, so that's fine.
It'll come.
Oh, bird magic, of course.
Oh, bird magic.
It was so like, fundamental that it was not
the whole thing. That's the whole thing. And so Kate set off on her journey into this like mountainous, foresty setting, and she took her companion Mocha, the ferret, along with her. And I had a ferret in middle school, so that's where that came from. And she wasn't sure why she was going on this journey, and she had a sad goodbye to her little bunnies at home, and they're like, "Why are you leaving? Stay here, it's safe here." And she's like, "I don't know, but I know I have to go." And so she heads off and encounters various challenges along the way, including a oh my gosh, what was it? A wolverine otter.
Yeah, some kind of like
otter
wolf otter, but a wolverine otter would have been better. Yeah.
Yeah, it was some combination of the two,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually Mocha was stolen from her from this she first encountered this like really creepy white guy in a cabin, and we're like, we do not know what this guy's about. And
there was like some kind of like mine or like industrial thing going on there. Yeah.
And there was definitely like, okay, there's more there, but we're not going into it right now. Yeah. And so then she kept going, and near the top, there was this canyon, and she needed to get across. But this bird, this giant eagle-like bird, came and stole Mocha from her, like grabbed Mocha with its talons. And Mariah tried to grab for Mocha and like fell off the side. But as she was falling, she realized her like bird magic was awakened, and she was able to fly up and rescue Mocha from the bird. And then we ended with Kate being like looking over the mountain, like vista, the view, seeing all these mountain ranges, and kind of like making eye contact with this bird, and like realizing why she was hiking when she like made eye contact with the bird. Is that how you remember? Is that how you remember it?
Pretty close, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I remember there being two moments of like the bird is flying off, but like turns back and looks at Kate, and she has this moment of, I don't even remember how we described it, but like this moment of intensity and mystery and purpose, you know? And then she like hikes a little more and sees the like whole landscape that she's been hiking through, and has that same feeling in terms of her relationship to the land or the community, or, I mean, we didn't define it, and that's part of the power of it. And we see her like then like turning back to like go
fulfill her mission of what she's
fuck up the poison mine or whatever.
Yes, that's it. I don't remember if I said this, but I realized that I was supposed to go, that the miner was like caging all these forest animals, and that's why the river monster wolf / otter was upset, because there was this guy that was trapping all the forest creatures, and it thought that I was helping him, but I wasn't. And so Kate was going to go and free all the forest creatures that this guy had trapped. So, but that's okay. That's a not so brief overview of what happened. But how did I experience it? I think I allowed myself to kind of get caught up in it. There was moments where I was kind of like, it's like when you're watching a movie, and there's moments where you're like, oh, right, I'm watching a movie. But like for the majority of the movie, you're like in whatever's happening, or at least I am able to get caught up in whatever I'm watching or reading. And so much so that sometimes I don't even hear other things going on. So there was times when I was very much caught up in it. And there was a few like moments of transition where I was like, I don't quite know what to say or do. But then Davi like helpfully like pulled me through, accompanied me through those moments. But it felt like dream work. It felt like exploring my dreams. It felt like I've done the EMDR is a practice that some therapists use, and it uses it mimics rapid eye movement to help you integrate trauma. Maybe I'll link something about EMDR underneath. So it felt like that, in a good way.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just fun. It felt like playing, but it also felt not that play and meaningfulness are antithetical, but it felt like both. How did you experience it?
Oh, I love that stuff. Because I have a full-time job, I don't have an opportunity usually to do just like straight up spiritual direction as a ministry. And so that was fun, to like put that hat on or whatever. And I also like don't get to do as much just like fun role-playing games as I like to. And so that was really fun. And I especially enjoy introducing folks to the hobby or medium or whatever it is. I mean, obviously you've like pretended to be Sailor Moon before, but like to like have some context for like, what is this like? And you know, like maybe you would feel more comfortable next time one of your friends invites you to play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. And I think like it was such a joy. It's always such a, like, I didn't have anything when I sat down. I had like some ideas for like, here are some like, kinds of scenes I could use that if we get stuck. But like, I think one of the first things you said was like, yeah, I've been like really thinking about Abraham and Sarah and Ruth and Naomi. And I was like, great. So we're doing like a journey. And like, whenever I like think about the Holy Spirit, I really think about bird imagery. And I was like, let's do this. Like, let's just like, I think part of my work when I'm doing spiritual direction, sometimes when I'm doing pastoral care, it depends on the context, is to see like, what's the thing that someone says that glimmers and be like, yeah, let's keep, can I hear more about that? You know, and not with a, like, I need to hear more about that, or that's the only way to do this, but like, you're excited about that. And so I'm excited about that. And, you know, I was just like, all right, we'll go on a journey. There'll be some obstacles, like maybe 3 because it's a story. It was the moment when, I also felt very intimidated to do Mocha's voice. And so I'm really glad.
That was I was thinking about that. Okay. A very important thing to note is that Davi played the voice of Mocha and did it extremely well.
Well, and from a like craft perspective, like I wanted you to have a dialogue partner as you were journeying, both so that like in the like action scenes you could talk about them, like make a plan together or whatever, and afterwards you could reflect about them. And I think like there are ways to do that without having an external character, but it worked for the setting. And then like when you came up with such a, like, I was like, who's going with you? And you like, there was almost no pause there.
Yeah.
And that was very profound for me of like, I'm going on this, spiritual journey, and the person who's coming with me is my like sweet ferret friend from when I was in middle school. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like do that voice justice, but like, I am definitely not saying no to that. Because maybe all of our pets, but especially the pets we have at like times that are so rich and terrible and wonderful as middle school, like, like yeah, and like theologically, I like, it's my belief that like Mocha continues to journey with you, and like we'll keep doing that. And so to like have a way to have that be a little bit more like direct than like whatever conversations you have with Mocha in other times, was really sweet.
You're making me think of all the possibilities of how this form of spiritual direction or healing or therapy or whatever could play a role in grief work. Like if you have kind of like, if you need closure with someone you have lost, or even a pet, and not to minimize pet deaths. They have had a huge effect on me. there's so much possibility there of ways to connect with lost loved ones.
And I'll say, like, if you were like, I'm going to bring my dead grandfather, I would be, cool, but you're going to have to do both voices, you know?
Yeah, you're not going to take on that role.
Maybe. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think there's other ways. Like, I've definitely had moments where I'm like, oh, like, this fictional elf really feels like my grandma or whatever. It's not always like a direct correlation, but like there's energy in this character that really reminds me of who my grandpa was / is in some ways, but like was when he was alive. Also, it was a gift because I don't know if you remember, but when you're walking away from the encounter with the ravenous otter monster, Mocha said something like, oh, like, why do you think that otter was a big monster? And Kate was like, oh, like, the water must be poisoned. And
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And so, like, very little in that. Some of the stuff in that adventure came from me, but a lot of it came from you as player / participant. And that was really fun to see your eyes and be like, okay, great. Like, if the water's poisoned, then like the next thing is where the water's getting poisoned. And so let's see how that resonates or not.
Yeah, that's cool. So I have a question. I am pretty good at kind of suspending reality and jumping into these types of things. Like, it's not hard for me to make that jump. I can be like, okay, you know, we're going into this world and whatever. Right. But I have friends whose voices are in my head of like, when I go to my spiritual director and they want me to talk to the chair, like it's my, you know, like it's my inner critic or whatever. I'm like, no, that's a chair. Like they have a hard time letting go and entering into these kind of alternate experiences, I guess. So what would you do with that? Like maybe people that are somewhat interested, or even like the total skeptics of like, not only is this dumb, but like this is potentially like spiritually dangerous or whatever.
Yeah. Let me take those separately, because I think like folks are not wanting to do kind of imaginative work in kind of self-growth contexts. That makes sense to me. That might be scary. That might be uncomfortable. That might be folks who like have had their imaginative experience hated on by other folks. You know, like they wanted to play Sailor Moon and their older sibling told them that was dumb, or, you know, whatever. My sense is that like some folks' personalities are just like really ready for this and some are not. And like, I don't think that like the best kind of spiritual direction is the kind that like helps you hear from the spirit. And so if this isn't your jam, that's fine. That being said, the number of times I've seen someone sit down at a table because they want to like pretend to be an elf and like murder some goblins or whatever, and then they like come away having like some kind of learning about who they are or like what's important to them is striking. So I think there's like, and also like if you just like want to pretend to be an elf and like use your magical crossbow to fight a giant, like that sounds really fun, and like I'm not. It doesn't need to be more than that, but it might be more than that, and that's also okay. You know, like there was a whole like satanic panic around Dungeons and Dragons in the '80s, where like it was gonna be the thing that like led people to demon worship or something. But I haven't really talked with folks who.
I thought you were going to say, I haven't really done satanic worship, so...
No, I'm not saying that. No, obviously Dungeons and Dragons led me directly to.
You're like, are you in like one of those like spell circles right now?
Well, I've got $2 American dollars in my pocket right now, and if that's not demon worship, I don't know what is. So...
Anyways, I'm sorry. I derailed.
I think I actually, on my way to work, drove by a panhandler, even though I had $3 in my pocket and didn't stop because I like didn't want to miss my light. So there's some demon worship right there. But in terms of, I think like the thing that I have heard, I had an amazing conversation one time with I think she was a Baptist pastor who was like, well, we're a peace church, but like the youth want to play Dungeons and Dragons, and like, what's the connection there? And I was like,
yeah,
I mean, like, here's why it's like relatively pacifist for me, but also like if you don't want to run it, fine. And like I I don't know. There was something else going on there that I never put my finger on.
So why is it past? I mean, I'm from the Anabaptist.
So like, yeah, thank you. I think that pretending to kill a mammoth that is like fused with an evil octopus is like. Did you just make a sympathetic noise, Mariah?
No, it was Nick calls it when I make that noise. My laugh is like revving up, like I'm like almost laughing.
Okay. I thought you were like,
sorry.
Which no. For you, and that's fine. Like I think for me, there's a way to do fantasy violence that's pretty separate from real violence, and actually maybe even attending to the parts of ourselves that are, for me, attending to the parts of myself that are inclined towards violence, and exploring that. And I also think that's not for everybody. And like, you know, many role-playing games, and the game that we played last week, like, have very little or no violence in them. I guess you did Kung Fu that
yeah, but I remember specifically saying that I didn't hurt the...
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Well,
I did not want to hurt the otter wolf thing.
Yeah, the otter wolf was just rolled down the hill
stunned.
And scrambled off.
Yeah.
Right, because then it helped make the bridge by accident. So I also think that there's a way to play, like in a video game, at least in most video games, like if it's about shooting people, you gotta shoot people. But like you could play a D&D module that's like, all right, like we think you're gonna like fight this monster and this monster and this monster, and like what you actually do is like convince this monster to like go on a date with you, and like convince this monster that it like will make more money if it teams up against you, and so you like intimidate the third monster into just like going to go start a Burger King somewhere. And like that's because you're just playing in the like imaginative world and not in like here's the like 100 or 50 or 2 different possible computer endings. It can make for some like creative problem solving stuff.
Like kind of like Jesus. Pew 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 pew. Third like third way kind of creatively discovering solutions, breaking out of the binary thinking of like this is the right way or this is the wrong way of solving a problem.
Yeah, and like if the thing you like in your D&D is to just like have a very like power fantasy, like we're fighting and triumphing against the bad guys. I might want to like trouble that a little, but I don't want to say that's a bad thing. It's a lot better now than it was 30 years ago, and even better than it was 10 years ago. But I think there's still folks who have an assumption that like role-playing games are like for this style of person or this particular genre or something like that. And those people are wrong. I feel the same way about churches, honestly. Like people, I mean, there's some role-playing games that are not going to be for you, just like there's some churches that are not going to be for you. But like, I think there might be something for you in this, I don't know, movement or art form or whatever it is. And if you would like to think more about that, feel free to reach out. If you want to do some spiritual direction, feel free to reach out. And if you're in Bellingham, feel free to stop by and join us for church. I'll have some dice with me. We'll see if there's time afterwards.
Yeah, thank you for opening up my eyes to the possibilities for how role-playing games can interact with spirituality and healing and even grief work and creativity and inner child or inner teenager healing. That's really exciting to me. And I'm someone who loves like fantasy worlds. So it's kind of like, these are a few of my favorite things.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Okay. But before I let you go to your meeting, would it be okay, Davi, if I bless you and all our baddies, all our viewers and listeners out there? Okay. Davi and all you beautiful, bad viewers and listeners, may you leave this space inspired to go on a journey of your own, whatever that may look like. If it lights up your inner child, amazing. If it doesn't, that's okay too. Yeah, may you be open to creative possibilities of ways that God or the divine or however you think of the universe may meet you and see you and bring out all of the beautiful facets of what makes who you are, what makes up who you are. Amen. Go and play.
Amen.
That's all for this episode of Called to Be Bad. Keep being your bad, beautiful selves, and I will see you next time.